so that we can have a little bit of discussion also amongst each other. I think that that's very valuable. Other than in previous editions, we today have fully Dutch cast, which is of course interesting, but also limitations. So I'm also very much urging our international attendees to become part of the discussion or during the different introductions that we will have. So like I said, we have three introductions. Time Hennis from And the People will be talking about his experience with community land trust. We will, I think you have the largest share of time allocated to you, about 15 minutes. Then Tijm en Kuiper from Brein and Co-wonen. Very nice that you can attend as well. As I understand, you will be focusing on the Deltadomus project. So we're intrigued what that might bring. And then last speaker is Philip Krabbendam from Co-wonen. Tijm also is affiliated with Co-wonen. So perhaps you also know each other already, probably. So probably very simple setup, pretty straightforward. We will have the speakers one after the others, in between a little bit of possibilities for answering questions. And we will be recording this session. So if you don't want to be visible, you can make sure you're not. However, I always very much enjoy seeing your face. If you have a question or if we're having this discussion, I would, if you want to, of course, recommend that you turn on your camera. It's already limited to speak online, and to not see faces makes it even harder to interact. So I would urge you to, but of course you can also decide for yourself. Let me just give the word to my partner in crime in this, Regitze Hess from IFHP, to add a couple of words for the introduction. Regitze.
All right. Hello. Thank you. This is Regitze here. This topic is so important. We see we're in a time, we're always in a time where the question of accessibility to housing is ever important, and it seems to be increasing in urgency all the time. It's a cliche now, but one would say the past century, the 20th century was the century of the city and the expansion of cities. But I've been saying for a number of years now that really the century we're in now, the 21st century, is really the century of housing, that we can't leave that behind. IFHP goes back more than a century, and in its original thinking, the thinking was to the delivery of housing in a cooperative form, but that became difficult to realize in its purity. So early garden city settlements really did become more, let's say, investments, philanthropic investments that became situations of rental. The current advancement of garden cities really does hold different types of ownership formats. The TCPA, which is really the mother of IFHP, does very much advance the format of a trust. And we will hear both about today cooperative formats, community-led trust formats, and then the whole idea of co-housing that I'm very curious to hear as well. The take today is because co-housing can actually have many different ownership forms. It can be a trust, it could be a cooperative, it could be rental. I know of various cases of different types of co-housing. It's very interesting to be in this international conversation. I would like to point out that we also have a Danish-Dutch connection going on here, with myself based in Copenhagen and the speakers based in the Netherlands. And there's actually been a long-standing tradition between the Nordics and the lowlands, the Netherlands in particular, to look at different housing formats. So we very much respect and appreciate that the Netherlands were early on in the formation of cities, but often there's a cross-pollination in terms of housing formats. So one often associates the delivery of or the advancement of, let's say, social housing or affordable housing or housing alternatives with Vienna and with Berlin. But we certainly also have both historically but also currently first movers. And today I'm very pleased that we will get some perspectives from current iterations of CLTs, cooperatives, and co-housing, because we keep on needing to have to renew the formats, but also remind ourselves how do we source the past but move forward in new ways. So that was a few comments on my part. I will leave the floor to our very good interventions that are coming through. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mikisa, for introducing the topic of today. So indeed, let's go to the first speaker. Time, you're first, and the floor is yours. You can take the screen if you want to.
Yes, let me check if the, oh yeah, I think this should work. Is this okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, great. Okay. Well, thank you, Regitze. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction and setting the stage for my presentation in the next ones. So, as the title of my presentation gives away, I will explain a bit about the community land trust as an alternative housing model, but I would argue beyond that, not just to build homes, but to also work on local resilience, stewardship, and communities. And why I'm fascinated by it is because I think it is truly a fundamental approach to work on the foundation for current generation, but also for future generations, to enjoy affordable housing, to keep that permanently affordable, and to allow people to be part of a community. So, as we have been working on this topic for years now in the Netherlands, but we don't yet have a fully functional CLT yet. There are some really interesting developments going on, but the first one still has to be implemented. I thought of the following questions to answer in this presentation. And I guess for question number 5, there won't be time, but that could also be something for the discussion. Obviously, I will very briefly introduce myself and my company. Important part is, of course, what is a CLT? What is a community land trust? As I expect not all of you have heard of it or have experience with it. The reason why community land trusts are worth bothering. So, what are its benefits? Why should we include them in urban development or non-urban development? And obviously some examples that illustrate that well. All right. If there are any questions in the meantime, I think it's better to postpone that to after the brief presentation. Oh yeah, so My company is And the People. It's a social innovation company in Amsterdam, and we often work in the space between government and citizens, or policy and the, practical, real lived experience, the systeem- en leefwereld, as we designers call it in the Netherlands. So we work on co-creating the bridge between policies, institutions, ambitions on the one hand, and people and communities on the other. So we are a small company and driven by some key missions, and one of them, since a couple of years, is to make the community land trust a common approach for developing, using, and managing land in the Netherlands. So one of the goals for me here is to spark interest in this model, and hopefully it will bring inspiration and moves people into really considering it as an alternative housing model or urban development model. I have a background as a researcher focused on self-organization. So this concept really aligns with commons and commoning, and it resonates with me because it's a great example of a commons, where community governance plays a central role. Brings me to the second question. So what is a community land trust? Well, CLTs, they are non-profit, democratic, community-based organizations, and they develop and manage homes and other assets, and keep them affordable to low and middle income households. And regarding the other assets, they are, they maintain them as well and steward them on behalf of a community. So they contribute to thriving local communities. Community land trusts, they act as long-term stewards of these assets and ensure that they remain permanently affordable for future generations. A bit of a historical background. The first CLTs were realized in the rural south of the USA by Black farmers who faced discrimination, eviction, and saw or developed and invented this model to protect themselves against that. So it was supported by the civil rights movement, and initially focused on community ownership of agricultural land. On the right, you see an early picture of Bernie Sanders, who was mayor in Burlington, Vermont, and he was the pioneer behind the first community land trust focused on housing. So he had good ideas back then also. So what does a CLT, what makes it unique and worth for us to consider in the context of alternative ownership? First of all, the CLT represents different stakeholders, interests, not just the users of the land or the residents, as often called them, and also not just the short-term interest. You can consider a community land trust more as a social developer that works to integrate the interests of three different stakeholders. Those are the residents or the users and future users of the land it owns. It's the broader neighborhood, and it's the broader community or public, and it facilitates collaboration, conversation between these different stakeholders, and it specializes also in this part. So it specializes in multi-stakeholder decision-making, and co-creation and collaboration. So in a CLT, the power is shared between these different stakeholders. It navigates between these different opinions and interests. And this also makes people entrepreneurial, it empowers them, it makes them responsible and active in deciding about what is going to happen with the land. Okay, the land, which is the main asset owned by the community land trust. On top of the land, these assets, they can be rented or bought, but always under the condition of anti-speculation. So, for instance, in England, you see examples of CLTs that have land and they give out assets where this condition applies for 999 years. So social housing organizations who are afraid of the government taking away their social housing or reducing it, they come up, they approach a CLT and they say, could you please buy our land? And then we have a leasehold arrangement for 999 years, which protects them for such a long time, which is really nice. And the final thing to consider is that it's not just about housing. So the land can be used in any type of way as long as it's on behalf of that community of different stakeholders. There could be housing, public space, agriculture, mobility hubs, commercial use, anything that is, in the best interest of the community. I think this makes it clear what a community land trust is. So an example of the latter is Coin Street CLT in London, where community development organization facilitated and stewarded the presence of social enterprises in a really prime location next to the River Thames. So because we have some cooperatives here as well, I have written down some, how it's different. So CLTs, they are required to represent the interests of different stakeholders, not just the residents. Some cooperatives do that as well, but it's not essentially part of it. Cooperatives are often focused on a project or a location, not always, but often. And a CLT is more like a social developer that is, stretching its perspective beyond one location, often a regional or a city or even province. CLTs are focused on empowering and engaging people who do not really have the resources or connections to start and finance a housing cooperative. What we see in Amsterdam is that housing co-ops are not really inclusive. It requires you to be, well connected, well versed, and home in all kinds of institutional arrangements, which is not everyone. CLTs often have a focus on target groups that don't have the resources, either mental or financially. Anyway, it has a strict result formula, and often this is also part of cooperatives, but not always. Also include a slide on housing associations. It's also different. CLTs, importantly, are very community-based. That's it. And obviously, on CLT land, you can also buy assets. It's not just rent. Okay, why to consider CLTs? It was brought up before, but a fundamental one is the sheer lack of affordable housing. This is one of the most pressing concerns CLTs globally try to address. And one of the major promises of a community land trust, it takes homes out of the market and makes them permanently affordable through anti-speculation or resale formulas, etc. And it's still very flexible in terms of how assets are owned. And on top of that, I added this research on how, and this is also applies to more cooperative co-housing models, but more collective, more cooperative approaches to housing offer many opportunities to reduce overall lifestyle costs, like sharing the care for kids or mobility sharing, food sharing, etc. They have many social, ecological, and economic value. There's a lot of evidence that affordable and community-based housing are effective in preventing things like loneliness and stress. And obviously that's logical, because if you are in a precarious housing situation, you are often faced with stress about money, about finance, and this has negative health effects. And obviously the C of CLT. Without a community, many people lack a social safety net or just someone to talk to. And a CLT does offer this. It's a proven model that prevents loneliness and actively contributes to community development, trading, empowerment programs, etc. I'll have an example of that a bit later. How far are we? What is interesting, and this is the research I did last year, I can share with you the link. CLTs are also more sustainable because of the incentive structure. So instead of having different owners in the life cycle of a development who control different stages of a development, you have a community land trust as a stewardship, governance, and ownership model that represents and integrates the short-term and the long-term objectives and marries the local with the global, and capitalizes on the ideas, needs, and expertise of communities. There's a term called split incentive, which indicates that. So the split incentive is that a developer doesn't have the same interests as a resident, or a resident doesn't have the same interest as a future resident. So in a CLT, there is no split incentive. The CLT is the steward of both the land and makes the terms and conditions of how the land is used. And secondly, the C again of CLT, it's community, but it's also collective, and it's the collective nature that allows people to share things. And it allows many opportunities for sharing solutions that in the end reduce material impact. So these are examples like shared mobility solutions that are almost a standard in many CLTs. And this sometimes doesn't happen automatically. Sometimes even the regulations prohibit you to include, enforce you to have a number of parking places part of the development. And then another asset of a CLT comes into place, which is that often these communities are very powerful lobbies towards local government, because in their governance framework, in their governance structure, the public perspective, the public value is integrated. So there's often already conversations going on with local authorities. There's been research into how public investments are, what the return on public investments are, and that's really effective. And also research into how CLTs are very trustworthy, creditworthy, and well-organized organizations that can be relied upon. Very interesting research also into how CLTs, because of the engagement and capacity building programs, but also just the fact that people are involved in developing houses, homes, other assets, neighborhoods, make them more believing themselves in their capacity, and they can also build small working groups that allow them to be more effective, also in terms of participation and local becoming locally active, which is, I think, really an interesting additional potential it has in our current day and age. Some other research outcomes: prevents displacements, especially of at-risk groups. Already mentioned this. I think I should have skipped this slide. This is another slide that more or less summarizes these benefits of CLTs. So let me finish with a couple of examples, and then be open for some questions. Maybe I can. So this is This is the first example, which was the CLT promoted and made possible by Bernie Sanders in Vermont, and it's very active and successful and develops land and homes for thousands of families. And that's also what you see is that especially the longer running CLT organizations have developed strong networks, financial resources, backing, professional operations, etc. Arc and Shell is an interesting project in Belgium, in Brussels, made possible by CLT Brussels. And there the focus was very much on capacity development, capacity training, and social interaction. One of the examples is cycling lessons for women who normally didn't get out much, and also the bus was expensive. They didn't own a car, and this allowed them to, become more connected with each other, and also more connected to the neighborhood and beyond that. So it has an empowerment function. Like shared ground floor spaces. This is what it's also almost a standard in urban CLT developments, where you see shared space that is not just for the residents, but also for the wider neighborhoods and neighborhood organizations. This is an interesting one, designed by and developed in collaboration with the neighborhood, resulting in a combination of functions that represent the entire life cycle. So from a birth house, I'm not sure what the English term is, but where people give birth, or women give birth, to a hospice next to one another. So and also care and community care facilities in the entire plinth. Obviously, our own project, where we started exploring the model in Amsterdam, Southeast, Habuurt, very strong presence of social housing, but also faced with developers, seeing an opportunity there to develop for the high and mid-income range, and with the phase of the threat of speculation and gentrification there. So our goal was to support and facilitate the community there in becoming a professional partner of the municipality. That was more or less the main objective. And in the process, we also mapped what was already there, the whole community infrastructure, connected it to policy ambitions, and made them a real partner in the development itself. And one of our current strategies is to avoid the tender that is planned for this next quarter. And this is going quite well. We are well connected. The community is well connected. They are independent of us. They have been for years. So it's going into a good direction, but it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle. Cornwall CLT, I picked this example because it's something that illustrates how community land trusts can become the default go-to partner for local authorities to build affordable housing. So what I just said, when they exist for longer, they build up credit, cloud, financial resilience, networks that allows them to become, the best developer to go to, and this makes them an interesting partner for many, local authorities. This example I picked, and I will share the slides later, but this example I picked because it's not just small, local, interesting, community-based developments that are done as a CLT, but also large-scale area development. And this is just one example. A recent publication of 2 months ago by the European Community Lenders Network highlights 5 or 6 of these cases and how they're governed and financed, and how they were started and made possible. Bridport, another largest co-housing project in the UK, also community lenders, really interesting in terms of how the entire community was engaged and part of the development. And I can also give some examples of that. Lopez, which is an example of how a CLT who attracts really ordinary people just looking for a home in engaging in a more sustainable lifestyle, because it's part of the values of that CLT, and it's happening, and it's not it just provides, it illustrates the opportunities CLTs have to, because they are in a more engaging manner with the residents, allows it illustrates the opportunity to really work on sustainable lifestyles. And that translates into food production, urban food, urban agriculture, sharing mobility, understanding how to maintain your house, how to work with different sustainable systems, etc. And there are community lenders just focused on agriculture, for example, but this is an example I already gave. I'm stopping now. There are some slides left about the journey we took in the Netherlands, but that would take us too much time. So I'm stopping my screen share. I will include the slides in the PDF I will share afterwards. Is that okay?
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Thieme, for your talk.
I think it was too long.
You were a little bit too long, but it was nevertheless very interesting. So I let you go. I let you off the hook a little bit, but it was very good to see these examples, which means that unless there is some really urgent question to be raised, I would propose to save your questions for the discussion later, so that I have a couple of them, so you can watch them come forward. I take one more look. There's no real urgent question. So thank you for now, Thieme, and then we will pick up the discussion after the other 2 presentations.
Yeah, and could they share the question in the chat in the meantime? So
of course,
yeah,
it's always an option. Let me check if there's something there that I missed. No. So indeed, let's do that. So urgent questions, go towards chat, and we will pick up the conversation later. Since I think it would be good to have Timon on the floor. Yes, there you are. Great.
Thank you.
Perhaps you can take the floor and take the presentation, and
Will do. Yeah.
try to keep to the time a little bit. Thank you.
Will
very
do.
much.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Thieme, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for hosting us. You can see my presentation, right? Double check.
Yes.
All good.
Perfect.
All right. So I'm Timon. Sounds like Timon, but Timon, and I will present to you about floating social rent cooperative initiative in the Netherlands. So I will briefly introduce myself. I studied urban planning in Amsterdam. I did a second bachelor's and a master's degree in architecture at the TU Delft. I just finished it. And about 1 or 2 years ago, I started a little advice company and design company, Co-Wonen, together with Philip Krabedam. He will present afterwards me, and we are both specialized in the design for community. So how can you design a building, a neighborhood, whatever, so that it facilitates community. I wrote a little book about that. You can download it for free if you'd like. And from that expertise, I also joined the drijvende kracht, which kind of means the floating power or the pushing power. And I will present to you about this project today. So briefly, I will say, what is that, the drijvende kracht? Well, it's a bit of a strange organization. There's a Breeman, which is a large Dutch installation company in the Netherlands, but it's family owned. So a lot of the profit doesn't go to shareholders, but it goes to Brein, which is an innovation company from Breeman. And there they sat around their table, which is a map of the Netherlands, which is literally underwater. And there they thought, what does the Netherlands need in the future? And that it's floating social housing and also more cooperative. So that's what I will tell you about. And I will briefly go through the whys. I think most of the Dutch people know these already, but maybe for the international audience, this is interesting. So the Netherlands is a very dense country. It's very polycentric, a lot of cities, basically functions as one big dense city. But we're also a river delta, and a large part of our country has a lot of flood risk. And of course, it's increasing. Now, the Netherlands is a strange country. A big part used to be swamp, and we are very good, world leading maybe even in getting the water out. But increasingly, we are noticing the limitations of this approach to the water. And increasingly, people are saying we should live with the water again, instead of pushing it all out, because it's coming from the rivers, it's coming from the sky, it's coming from the seas, it's coming from the ground. And we just have to start giving areas back to the water. And then we can also build on top of the water, floating neighborhoods. So it might sound a bit futuristic, but it's already happening. So in Amsterdam, there is this little neighborhood called Schoon Schip. And it works very well, but it is quite expensive. So it's for the happy rich, the few. And if we want to really adapt our country to the future, it should not be just for some. And at the same time, we have this massive housing shortage and affordability crisis in the Netherlands. Housing prices have doubled in the last 10 years, and our salaries didn't double, at least for most of us, they didn't. Now, there's some reasons, and one of the reasons that we are in this housing crisis, without going all too much into politics, is that the average number of persons per household has been shrinking a lot. So where there used to be 3 or 4 persons per household on average, now it's around 2. And the loneliness is rapidly increasing as well. And with half of people already suffering from loneliness in the Netherlands, and 1 in 7 from severe loneliness. And that with the backdrop of this aging population and this loneliness, we've kind of got these 3 big problems that our project is trying to solve. So we want it to be floating, to be climate adaptable. We want it to be affordable, so a solution for many, not just for a few happy people. And we also want it to be more cooperative, because we have this loneliness crisis after a long age of individualism. And long story short, this is now what we have. It's a big floating building, really. So it's not a boat, it really is an architecture, it's a building. But it is floating. But furthermore, it's stationary. It won't go anywhere, just up and down with the water of the rivers, of the floodplains, of the sea, maybe even. Now, simultaneously, we're also developing smaller, different sizes, different models. But for now, the focus is on this big one. And I will tell you a bit more about it. Now, I said, well, we want to make it floating. I won't bore you with the details for that. Just trust us and the engineers, it does float. Or it will float. Now, how do we solve affordability? Now, we use a lot of prefab wood modules. So we also use CLT, but cross-laminated timber. It's not a CLT. And with the system, we can build very high quality bio-based materials, but still quite cheap. Now, what I find very interesting, and that's more my specialty, is the co-housing or the cooperative living lifestyles. Now you see in these corners, there is a lot of flexibility that if we make more of these floating buildings, they can very easily change and adapt. And also through time, the community can change those corners to adapt to changing lifestyles, changing residents, changing needs and wants. Now, that is the building, and of course we've got this really nice inner courtyard with kind of like an in-between climate as well, where people can meet. But how do we make this also affordable? How do we organize this? Well, the Netherlands is a very interesting country, as that around 1/3 of our housing stock is social housing from mostly housing associations, and we are unique in the world in that. But if you use the social housing associations to organize social housing communities, some problems may arise. So generally, there's a very low sense of ownership for these residents. It's because, well, it's not their building, so it's not their land, like a community land trust. So they have very little say in what happens to the building, also who becomes their neighbors. Usually waiting lists dictate who they will live with, and maybe if you want to share spaces in a more cooperative lifestyle, that doesn't really work. For the same time, for the housing associations, they're very wary for cooperative lifestyles or collective lifestyles, because then they suddenly have to manage all these collective spaces, and who pays for that? What happens if they remain empty? It doesn't work, and they have to like hire people to organize activities and manage those things. So they're a bit wary for it as well, because they've had a rough time in the last decade, these housing associations in the Netherlands. So a kind of a solution is, which is already an old solution, and Philip will tell a bit more about that, but it's kind of been maybe forgotten a little bit, and it's kind of being reinvented. It's this management cooperative. And in Dutch we say beheercoöperatie. So it's a fancy word, but what it basically is, it's an association of the residents. So in this big Deltametropolis project, there's roughly, let's say, 50 households, and all the residents to rent an apartment there, they are part of this management cooperative, of this association. And this association, they rent the entire building, the entire floating building, from the housing association. So this is one rent contract. But then these residents, this management cooperative, they sublet all the apartments and the shared spaces among each other. And then they can make agreements. How do we want to distribute the rent? How do we want to distribute the costs? Who does what? And also they make agreements with the housing association for maintenance. So for example, in normal social housing, if a light bulb is damaged, they will call the housing association the residents. But now they do it among each other as a management cooperative. They can also select their own neighbors, and this all brings down costs for the housing association and eventually also for the residents. And the most beautiful and important thing, I think, is that it really heightens the community engagement, because this building will be a building from the residents. It will be a community by the residents and not a community organized for the residents, which so often happens. So the residents are not consumers of the community, they really produce it themselves. But the big advantage of the system is that still the housing association, as a big professional organization, they have funding to build and to pay for the construction, which normally social housing residents do not have a few million euros lying around. They can help with large maintenance. So there's still this kind of safety net. So to conclude, we are developing a floating building to be climate adaptable, and make it affordable, and most importantly for me, it's cooperative. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you very much, Diamond, for your presentation. A very short and concise presentation. Thanks so much. Direct questions, raise your hand, please, if you have them, and otherwise we will continue directly towards Philip. Yes, I think we can continue directly. There's already some questions in the chat coming up, and also some good ones to take up in the discussion further. So I think it would be nice to have the third presentation, and then we can have that as a start for the conversation with the four of us and the rest of the group. So
okay, thank you very much.
Take the
Then I try to launch my presentation. Yeah, there it is. I'm always happy when it really works. I I studied architecture in the 60s and 70s, so it's a long time ago. But even in those days, we were already thinking of collective living, co-housing. And I was also connected to a group in Delft, a co-housing group. They were called Centraal Wonen. And I joined this group, and then together with the group, I designed my first Centraal Wonen project. It was a third in the Netherlands. So it was in quite in an early stage. I think at the moment there are about 50 or 60 co-housing projects of the scale of our scale with about 100 or 150 people. I also did a PhD in Delft about what is it? Connection, no, involvement. And then I joined Diamond Kuiper later, just last year, for a co-wonen advice club. We have a lot of fun there. Okay, this is the first project of Centraal Wonen in the Netherlands. It's designed by Leo de Jonge architects. It's about 50 houses, and they have on a small scale. Small scale, you see the yellow figures. These are kitchens, group kitchens. And on a bigger scale, you see the red facilities, and that's for the whole project. And this is a bar, library, a garden here, a common garden. Can you see? And facilities for children to play and for hobby. So you see here different scale levels. You see the level of the house, private, the level of the group kitchen, and the level of the project. And I think this layered structure is what you see in all co-housing projects. This is a project that I designed in the end of the 70s. It was ready in 82. Also in co-creation with the residents. That's me. And what you see also is a layered structure. You see that the groups are all situated around a courtyard, and we have 3 courtyards with groups, and these courtyards, they are connected with the facilities for the whole project that are situated here on the main square of a part in Nieuwegein, a new neighborhood in Nieuwegein. Fokkersteeg. Okay, this is the Centraal Wonen project in Delft that I helped design. You see also, again, you see the yellow group kitchens. Some are small, some are bigger. These are just kitchens like this, where we can eat. But these are bigger, and you have a sitting area and a cooking and eating area, dining area. This is the lowest level. Then we have the next level is what we call the cluster. It's a courtyard. This is one cluster. This is one cluster. And we have one here, and we have one here. The cluster is the next level. It's a garden. You can see it here. It's a garden and bicycle storage and a DIY place and washing machines. They're all here, washing machines, bicycle storage, etc. And here and here. So that's the next layer, and the top layer is the bar for the project, and we have a room for yoga and dancing, and a room for hobby with heavy equipment. And then we still have the vegetable garden. We have a huge vegetable garden. It used to be parking lots, but we asked for the community to if we could change it into a vegetable garden, and it was okay. So we don't have that many cars, so we can manage this way. Centraal Wonen, this is how it looks like. It's a bit high, but it's friendly with the garden, as you may see here. And my picture is a bit behind your pictures. Is that also in your case? Anyway, sorry. Yeah. Now, when you have these different social and spatial scale levels, you can see that life on these different levels is also a bit different. This is the group kitchen, this is the household, and the group kitchen, this is the cluster group or the courtyard, and this is the project as a whole. And you see when we decide for the group kitchen, we work with consensus. We all have to agree. We are about 6 or 7 persons in one kitchen, so we have to decide for a new resident, for example, and we use consensus. The next one is the cluster or the courtyard, and we use consent. If somebody has a plan for the garden, well, if you don't really like it and you have no problem with it, you just let it go. And it's not only about the garden, but it's also about washing machines, workshops, bike parking, and there is even a living room there in our place. For the project, we just use a majority vote. Of course, we think of people who are against it, and we try to find a solution, but in the end, we use the majority vote. Okay. For the selection of new residents, in our place, every resident is part of one of the kitchens, one of the 30 kitchens, and if somebody is leaving, there is a room free in the kitchen. And then we ask people, we have a list on the internet where you can say that you're interested in living in our place. We look at that list, we pick some people out of it, 3 people most of the time, that seem to fit best. We ask them to come, and then we make our choice, so we can choose our own residents. Okay. What is going on here? Here you see the different scale levels again. The funny thing is, can you see the whole picture? How are you?
Yes.
You can see Flip. You have to hurry a bit up, Flip. You're running out of time.
Oh my dear. Okay, so I go to the next. This is where I live, and I wanted to talk about flexibility. We have flexibility in the cluster. You can see here, you see 4 kitchens. And when you're living in one of these living areas, you can go to this. If you're living here, for example, you can go to this kitchen, to that kitchen, and even to that kitchen or that kitchen. We wanted to make the kitchens open to the neighbors and not isolate people in their kitchen, because we thought then we have the same isolation as a nuclear family, but now on the level of the kitchen. We didn't want that. Okay, then you have this part more detailed, like a real drawing. This is the part where I live. Here's a kitchen. Here's a kitchen. We have a big living room together. This is the garden, the washing machines, the workshop, and the bicycle storage, and the back entrance for the bicycles. This is the main entrance. If you come in here, you come in this big place, and you can look to the windows into the kitchen, and you can also look in that kitchen. So you have a vision of what's going on in the kitchen. That's where you come in. This is one of the kitchens, and you see we have windows here, and we have a window there, and the door is open. So you can always have a chat. And I think having a chat is very important in the co-housing project. Once I said it's the oxygen of a community, having just spontaneous chats. Okay. Now I'd like to show you something about the setup of the place where I live, the more private area. These private areas are built up from basic modules. These are basic modules. This is a basic module. This is a basic module. This one is an extended basic module, and this one is extended as well. That was in the planning, in the co-creation. We asked people who wanted. We asked them, "Do you want an extended module or just a standard?" Stop talking.
No. Please wrap up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, well, what I want to say is this is very flexible, because this standard model, you can use it as a place for a student who lives here with as a bedroom and a working room. You can use it for parents as a sleeping room for parents. You can use it as a living room. And so you can make different combinations between all these rooms, also all different floors. So you have a lot of flexibility due to common facilities like a bathroom and a little kitchen on the first floor and the first floor and the second floor for making coffee or simple meals. Well, shall I stop here? Maybe I should. Beautiful. And well, that's me on the right. And what we see here is Timon and I developed a way to design co-housing projects. And in this area, you can see we talk about what should be in the project, what functions. We translate it in volumes. And as soon as we have this set up with volumes, we can ask people to build their own project and to discuss it. And here they show their projects to each other. That was my story. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. So there's already quite active chat going on, active discussion in the chat. Let me get Pam and Tim on the floor as well. We have about half an hour for some of these points which were mentioned in this quite active discussion. So I think some of them have already been answered, and it was interesting, Timo, that you showed this difference between community land trust and co-housing. I think that helped us very much in understanding these different models. But there was quite some discussion on the financial model, and I thought maybe perhaps it's interesting to go into that still a little bit further. It was also some of the questions I had for myself. I think it was Mace who was asking this, like why is this community land trust more affordable from the onset? I can understand if it's like has been there for a couple of years because you have means of which may be also interesting to hear a little bit more about anti-speculation means, like how do these work? Of course, then I can understand that you get some sort of difference between the normal market and the homes in community land trust. But how does it work from the onset? Actually, can you discuss that a little bit further or explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, so financing CLTs is indeed a very interesting topic. A CLT, community land trust, doesn't magically reduce building costs or something like that. Or if land is acquired, either the CLT pays market rate and it needs to get external funds to purchase the land from the market, or if a local authority or philanthropist or any other landowner thinks it is worthwhile if a CLT is, taking ownership of a piece of land, then they could decide to give it away or provide a lower rate than the market rate. And that would enable building homes and other assets for a more affordable price.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a magic or formula or a silver bullet that could somehow make the overall building cost lower, because it doesn't. Obviously, you have a community and you could engage the community to be part of the building process and somehow find a way to involve them in a very active way that could reduce building costs. But it's you know, it's a bit exclusive. It's not always possible with every target group. So other funds are required to enable affordability in the first generations, first generation of homes.
Yeah.
And then
Okay. That's clear. And then when it continues, because basically, how does it anti-speculation? How does that work?
Yeah. So there's a good argument to make towards public funders to invest in community land trusts, because indeed you can use anti-speculation. It's part of the model or resale formulas that you can promise that these assets keep on giving social value, because like affordable housing and community are social values that are worthwhile to to provide. So with a CLT, this is protected. So there's a rule that once you buy a house, for instance, on a CLT, that if you want to sell your house, it's either resold to the CLT itself, and the CLT puts it on the market for other members or for the wider public, or there is a formula that allows you to sell the house, and that formula includes the investments you have done in the house yourself. So if you've increased its value, then obviously some of that investment or all of it should be returned to you. Some, market price increase could also be included in this resale formula. But also often what is done is that the average or median income for the target group income that they want to provide houses for is included in the resale formula. And because these houses are never going to be sold for more than the market price, there's hardly any risk for CLT houses to be submerged. Like there will always be demand for, especially after generations. The difference can become quite high.
Yeah,
50% or 70% below market rate.
But I can also understand that could also lead to a certain problem if you have very old community land trust in which the housing prices are significantly lower. Is there not a danger that it's sort of
it could happen? Yeah, it could also happen that the CLT decides that this difference is too large, and that part of the difference is going to be invested in new homes or new land, acquiring new land. So this is all happening. It's there's not one specific or single formula that is used or adopted. And what is interesting with finance as well is that recently there have been talk about how to finance social and environmental sustainability in area development, that they want to more or less understand, like pre-finance social and environmental sustainability from the onset. So these types of funds, like urban impact bonds or whatever, could be theoretically be included in the establishing a CLT. But this is rather new, like watertorenberaad, samen slim, that kind of stuff.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Of course, I mean, everyone who wants to join in with a question, please do. Now's your time. You can raise your hand and I can put you on the stage, or if you don't want to, you can just use your voice to raise a question. I think it will be good. I think it's interesting to see these different models, and I thought it was very interesting, Philip's presentation, that actually are we seeing an re-emergence of of a model, and that's a little bit what I had a feeling with your pictures from the 1970s period, which we associate perhaps a lot with that kind of community living. Do you feel is there kind of re-emergence, or does it have another feel or a different other kind of background? Maybe Tijmen or Philip, can you say something about that?
I can say there's a lot of re-emergence. In the 80s, those projects were built very much. There was a wholesale building, Central Ramona project. In the 90s, it went down, and in the years 10, nobody was talking about it. They asked me, do you still live in that group? As if it was old-fashioned. But from 2015 onwards, there was a revival of interest, and people, students from the university, are still coming here in, well, I can say many of them. And there's also a research office now, CoLab, that is investigating co-housing over the world. And the interest is growing very much at the moment, and I'm very glad about that.
Tijmen, you want to say something about that re-emergence?
Yeah, it's I often hear people say to me, "Oh yeah, co-housing, that's the future." And I think, no, it's not the future. It's very much the past. It's pretty much what people have been doing all over the world for all of humanity, various forms of collective living. It's only kind of been forgotten in the last decades, really. So it's more of a reinvention or a rediscovery, I think. So not just of like, I can dare to say, Flip's era, but also, yeah, much before that. Of course, we are finding new ways to organize it and finance it, and structure it from our current society. But a large part of my research, or what I've been doing together with Flip in this book, was really looking at what has worked already and what didn't work in more the architecture. So a lot of architects are also pretending it's something new, but it's a very old thing, and we have much to learn from the past.
It's new for them.
Yeah.
It's new for them, and that's a bit dangerous.
Yeah. I believe there was also a podcast about one example in Utrecht. I don't know if you know that from by heart, in which they also described the way this kind of model changed over time, and that it didn't work and started working again. And perhaps it's interesting to look up that podcast and in the link as well.
That's great. Yeah.
Pierre, come in.
Yeah. So can you hear me? Yes, I think so.
Yes.
I'm wondering,
can you introduce yourself maybe in a couple of words?
Sorry. I'm Pierre Kater, so my background is architecture, building technology, and I work a lot with parametric design in the whole topic of housing, but I've been also exploring more as a freelancer how to engage communities and actually try to combine the two, so digitalization, sustainability, and co-housing. And I previously was working at OMRT, which does housing for real estate developers as a tech startup. And my question would be, how do you see the potential for automation / AI / parametric design approaches and tools to be integrated in such processes of creation or planning of housing? So in the sense of how to speed it up also.
Interesting question. It also feels a little bit like, okay, you have the community on the one hand and maybe AI on the other hand, or how should we look at this? Tijmen, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, recently Flip and I were at a conference, and we were doing our presentation on how architecture can facilitate community. And then afterwards there was another presentation from someone who made an app all with AI for housing associations to manage community. And there was this big AI model, and the housing association barely had to do anything, and this AI was like measuring the community, and if the community was measured if people were using their app. So they were saying, well, people use the app a lot, so there's a very vibrant community. So we are always a bit wary if you do everything digital and then measure success digital as well. And then I asked what the people see each other on the shared walkway. Does the app know that? So no, it doesn't know, but we do know if they use the app. And all these housing associations were flocking to this app, and they're making a lot of money with selling community. So yes, of course, there is a lot of potential in using new digital technologies, but also be wary of maybe the tech bros trying to sell it. Like same with all the co-living development. There's a lot of big real estate investors using co-living, but the driving force behind that is making value for the real estate investors. The community-led housing, the driving value is community. So always do be a bit wary of that. At the same time, like me and Flip, we found all these patterns, almost mathematical conclusions of what does work and doesn't work in a building to facilitate community. And yes, in parametric design, you could probably indeed incorporate those to speed it up.
Yeah. Any thoughts from Timo on this topic?
Well, as far as I can tell from experience here in the Netherlands, the main challenges we have is not directly solved by technology. It's mostly having people at key positions, like landowners or those in charge of land development at a municipality and others, to take a step to allow for these models to be implemented, to experiment with it, to invest in them, and to explore some other issues that need to be solved or addressed, such as, if you have a house on land that is owned by a community land trust, and the house is sold to you under certain conditions, how does that work fiscally? How does it work with getting a mortgage? But also the other side, how do we finance the social and environmental impact that is likely to be delivered by a community land trust? These are more institutional and financial political aspects that need to be considered first.
Okay. Good. There was quite some discussion in the chat by Liedewij and Alan Krita also going into that, like, who, if I can summarize that, like, who has time for this? Like, we're all too busy, basically. How can you expect from people, certainly when you're under pressure because of all kinds of circumstances in your life? How can you become part of such a thing? I think the two models are a bit different in that, in which I think the co-housing goes a little bit further than the CLT, but maybe, Timo, can you say something?
Yeah, I can be very brief about that. So within the scope and the diversity of CLTs, you have community land trusts which are really strongly community-based, and where community engagement and participation is like a key component of it. And you have community land trusts that are very similar to housing associations, where there's a professional organization that takes care of acquiring land, developing land, meanwhile assessing needs and other things with the community, but where the community or not all in the community are involved in a very strong way. So it has the whole scope.
Yeah, so that differs. Liedewij, are you happy with that answer?
Partly. I think it's a very interesting debate, and thanks for all the presentations. I just wanted to point out that we shouldn't fall into this trap of delegating public responsibilities to a project level, because there are some problems that you just can't solve at project level.
Yeah.
And especially tend to put a lot of expectations on inclusivity and togetherness and mutual aid and resolving loneliness into these communities. I tend to see it very pragmatic. I was really happy that you pointed out the possibility of using collective solutions. And I mean that in an architectural way, like collective heating, collective solar panels, collective mobility, as you mentioned, because I think there are the real structural supports that we can offer to people who are not so resilient in terms of money, in terms of physical capabilities, in terms of mental capabilities. So we have to be really, I mean, I'm totally in favor of self-empowerment and self-steering, but we really need to look as professionals, what are the means that we can give and instruments that we can provide for this to really happen for everybody and not overlook and think, okay, you know, we think about the able-bodied, well-educated person who is able to afford the time to be engaged and to be friendly and to be co-educating, etc., etc.
Yeah,
because
that's an
that's
interesting
quite
question. Also internationally, I thought it was very interesting. One of you showed this slide of the share of social housing between and the big differences that are there internationally speaking, and how these different models sort of belong to each other in a way. But what are we talking about in terms of share of the housing stock that could be interesting for both CLT and co-housing? Can any of you say something about that?
I'll just publish in the chat a link to a paper that I wrote with Sherilyn McGregor on this issue.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, great. Yeah, but I think co-housing, first of all, there's not one type of co-housing. Co-housing is thousands of different lifestyles, and there's a multitude of different ways, like financially, juridically, to organize it. So, I mean, a nice street where people know each other, where there's a community going on, but everyone has their own bolt house, could already maybe be co-housing within some definitions.
Yeah.
So, but I think in the end, for maybe at least 90% of of humans, it's nice to have some type of familiarity with the people that live in your vicinity. But yeah, whether it's co-housing or not, it's
yeah. Okay, so you say it can never be. It's just about our community, and it can take that many different forms, and therefore, actually, why would we not have availability for everyone in that kind of sense? Jonas, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Paul, and thank you all of you for the presentations. It's indeed a very interesting subject. And for me, one thing I'm always wondering is how can you scale up? And not only one model, how can you create a diversified way of ownership on a real scale, and not only social, market-driven, and then a very little share of creative options, which exist for very, very long time indeed. As far as you go back in history, you can find actually a lot of creative way of living together and a lot of resilience. And what you just said, Timon, is also true, even in neighborhood where the facilities are bad and the maintenance from the municipality isn't well, people have a sense of social cohesiveness and they live together. They don't have the choice, even if they work 40 hours a week and have 2-3 children, some people 2-3 jobs to survive. And my question is more this, I'm not gonna ask the pain in the ass question, how can you make sure that those people who survive in many ways more than they live, how do you make sure they are integrated in this kind of plan? I think it's far too long a discussion. My question would be more to your opinion. Is there some elements, can be financially, it can be the role of local, of national, or whatever authorities of beginning with a scale up, and not necessarily in the Netherlands, maybe Tieme, I believe you have some example maybe of country where you have a kind of bigger scale of CLTs. What do you think are important elements to going that way and to sell it the right way for as much the market as local authorities? Thank you.
It's a very big question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would refer to that publication I mentioned from CLT Europe in collaboration with Dark Matter Labs, where they explored large-scale developments in, especially in the UK, where the CLT model, at least if we speak of Europe, well, Europe and the UK, has been established the longest. And what they define, what they describe also in that publication is you see three different starting points for these large-scale developments, which is either community-based, so community is lobbying, working hard, and really taking a long time before they, get the opportunity to acquire developed land. There's the starting point of a bold initiative from the municipality where they say, let's just do it. Let's create this opportunity. Let's make it possible. And there's these social developers that take the initiative. So these three different ways of how these large-scale developments emerge, and they conclude that if you talk about scaling up, and the easiest path would be through a social developer or landowner or the municipality. But the community-based, more activist route is always taking more time than the other ones.
So you need a degree of professionality to sort of speed it up in a way.
Well, I think it's more about power. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, they have the power.
Yeah.
This is my strategy in the Netherlands as well. So we've been doing community-based development in the Belmer, but now we are involved in two major developments in Rotterdam with the municipality and Architecture Institute Rotterdam to explore the model in Schiehhaven and Rotterdam Stij. So,
all right, good. We have to wrap up a little bit. We're running out of time. I just put Regitze back on the floor also because of your introduction and your thoughts about that. Can you maybe also help conclude a little bit in thinking?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for the three presentations. It was very interesting to hear current perspectives. And I'd also like to thank the audience for the many questions. For myself, I see this challenge between what I would call hard value and soft values, which has come up in conversation. The hard value, how do we finance? And it was interesting to hear the different types of models for financing. And also the soft values, how do we ensure that we do our utmost, for example, to address the need for oxygen, as Philip used the term. And what I know from my circles, my own personal circles actually, is finding the financing to float the loan or float the mortgage is a big challenge. I wrote it in the comments. Financial institutions, this is not common for them. And then the challenge of, or something I see going on in various new forms of co-housing, let me just use that as a common expression, is how can we be better at matchmaking so that we can invite as many people into this opportunity. It's not just word of mouth or who you know, but as many people can be invited in. But how do we ensure that there'll be some sort of harmony in the understanding of engaging in a more cooperative, collective socially a housing format that it requires that we cooperate or we share.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. I think very lively discussion in the chat still going on with a lot of links, so that's very good. We have to conclude, so I would like to end with very big thank you to Flip and Timon and Time for their presentations and for your discussions and for all your thoughts, also from the rest of the audience. We will have another session exactly in 1 month. So that's always nice in this time of year, that exactly on the 26th again, same date, next month, we will have the next Learning Lab. And I just put Ellen-Grete on the screen to inform us what will this one be about. And perhaps we will promise you to be a little bit less Dutch-centric. Ellen-Grete?
Yes, thank you so much, Paul. So I think mostly this has been already communicated, but for everyone to know, we are doing this every month. So for the whole year of 2025, we will be organizing 8 sessions. Paul mentioned at the beginning that this is the 3rd one, but in the actual series, it feels like the 2nd one because the first one was a 0th session to really prepare for these series. So also collecting what do we want to learn from each other? What are the international cases or gaps that we can learn from each other? So that way we have, this was the 2nd one. And the 3rd one is very much on the Q&A round today, actually by the community and for the community. What does that mean? So what does this discussion of not from the CLT side only, or not from the cooperative housing part only, but also what are the other extensive ways that the community is building up themselves. So we are trying to get some different non-Dutch centric cases as well. I'm not yet allowed to put out the speaker names. However, the link I have put in there, you can already start registering. The registration links are open. And if you are really interested in the discussion, all the registration thing for the whole series is also there in the same link. So please feel free to register yourself for the whole series.
All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and hope to see you again next month. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.